I do get asked to build armour quite frequently, so when I saw this Italeri Panther in the model shop, I couldn't help but pick it up. Hello everyone, I'm Matt, this is Model Minutes, and join me on the workbench as I build and review this Italeri Panther in 1/72 scale. I've already done a detailed unboxing video where I take a look at the contents of the box, including the painting instructions, decals and plastic parts, so for more information on those, check out that particular video. In this one I'll be focusing on what this kit is like and rounding off with a review on the end. As usual, I'll put a list of the products I used on the screen now to give you an idea of the kind of things you might want to go and get if you fancy having a go at this one for yourself. And without any further ado, let's get into it. As usual, my first steps will be to remove the plastic parts from the sprue by cutting them away with my snips or carefully removing them with a sharp knife. Any excess flash could be sanded down, but fortunately there isn't that much flash on this moulding as the parts are quite crisp. Tamiya extra thin cement will be my glue of choice throughout this build. And the first steps were to build up the running gear of the tank. This kit comes with a number of individual wheels for each side of the hull. I selected the correct ones and then built them up in layers following the assembly instructions. This was a little bit time consuming and a little bit fiddly in places. When the wheels were done, I turned my attention to the drive sprocket, which again comes in a couple of parts which has to be joined together and then carefully added onto its axle on the side of the tank. Following this, there is a return wheel which also has to be added on. With the final outboard running wheels now added, it's time to move on to the tracks. So these are technically an upgrade that Italeri added into this kit. This is a slightly older tooling and I'll talk about that a bit later on, but it is my understanding that originally this would have had rubber band tracks. It does now, however, feature link and length, but I'm not a massive fan of the way these have been designed. Perhaps they come in too many parts, they're not moulded as well as the other parts in the kit, and I did find them quite frustrating to join together. This was a rather fiddly and time-consuming step to complete, and you have to get the correct number of track links joined together in order to replicate the tracks on the side of the vehicle. I think what really frustrates me about these link and length tracks is that some of them have to be individual lengths and you have to kind of fold them around like the sprocket, and that was just insane. It doesn't quite fit. It's just janky. It just doesn't work. And also because some of them are just really long lengths, they're just flat lengths of track, it becomes clear what they are because there's just these kinks in the track as it goes along. So part of me kind of wishes I still had a rubber band track to play with because I think that might look a little bit better. Or alternatively, I don't really know what I'm doing with link and length tracks, and perhaps I just need more experience with them. And with those tracks now complete, it's time to move on to the rest of the tank. The rear of the tank has a number of smaller details which need to be added, and they were all glued into the relevant holes on this particular piece. And then I joined the sides of the tank to the lower hull. This very much builds up a bit like a box and is fairly straightforward. It's at this point here that we find the first part of the kit which is not actually included. We'll see this kind of thing again later on in the build, but here it says that we need to have some blanking plates for the tank. I couldn't be bothered to make these out of card or plastic sheet, so what I've done is I've designed them in CAD and 3D printed them at home. A little bit of super glue would be used to glue in these resin blanking plates, but despite the fact that I designed them exactly as per the dimensions that Italeri suggested we create them, they don't seem to fit quite perfectly. I know this product was originally designed not to have these included, and actually in the finished build you wouldn't be able to notice if you omitted them anyway, so you probably could just skip this step. But it's a little bit frustrating at this point that I've had to create parts for this kit which were not initially included. With that done, I assembled the parts for the machine gun, and then this was inserted from the inside of the hull. This main body of the tank was then glued onto the chassis we've already built. And now we come to the third annoying part of this build, and that is the side skirts. So the box artwork and the painting instructions actually show you that there should be side skirts, but on the instructions it tells you to make them yourself. They're not actually included in the kit, which I find very frustrating. Fortunately, our friend LPJ Models is a bit of a whiz at 3D design, and I sent him the dimensions, and within 45 minutes he designed an STL file for me to print out. So thanks LPJ, and I'll drop a link to your channel below the video. But I do have some side skirts now which I printed out and could super glue onto the side of the tank. Yes, these could have been scratch built, but actually if they're 3D printed it means that I can print as many as I want for other projects. I do find it very frustrating that we kind of had to do Italeri's job for them here. With that done, there are various other details which need to be glued into place on the top of the tank. And some of these include extra bits of track, which I presume might have been used as extra armour or simply stowed on the side as spares. These would all be glued together, then attached in the relevant positions as indicated on the instructions. I was quite impressed by the number of separate details that go onto this kit, but I could imagine them being a little bit fiddly to paint. I've decided for kind of speed of painting that all the bits are going to be glued on. I'll just have to very carefully pick them out in relevant colours later on. So with all of the smaller details now added onto the sides of the tank, I'm going to assemble the main gun. This comes quite traditionally in two halves, which were glued together. This was then glued into the mantle, and it kind of has this retaining part which allows you to freely pivot the gun, but I wonder how effective this will actually be. It is a little bit of play value, but I'm not sure I'm too fussed if I can't get it to work correctly. Now onto the turret. The turret comes in a number of pieces and is built up in a similar box-like fashion that we did with the hull. Annoyingly though, I must have missed a step in the instructions because you have to install the gun before you glue the base plate in. It is possible this is entirely my fault, but there are points where the instructions aren't necessarily as clear as they possibly could be. With that rectified though, I moved on to add the various hatches to the turret, and I opted to leave the main hatch at the top open. There is a rooftop machine gun which can be added here as well. And with that done, it was time to add the towing cables. So it does actually tell you in the instructions to warm them up so you can kind of conform them to the surface details. I've put them in a cup of hot water to try and soften the plastic so they become a bit more bendy. This kind of works, but it wasn't fantastic. I would carefully manipulate these towing cables into positions on the side of the tank and then glue them in. Whilst strictly not necessarily part of the build, I've decided to add some extra tracks to the side of the turret. There is a figure included as well, and he comes in a number of parts, so I had to glue his arms onto his body. And here you can see me test fitting the turret onto the tank. Again, this has a little bit of play value, so it can be free to turn left and right. After this, I decided that I would glue in a couple of extra details. I've got some jerry cans which were left over from a previous project, and I thought there were a few little spaces which would be perfect for them. And that's primarily the build complete. Now it's time to move on to some painting. I fortunately received some free samples of these outlaw paints to try out. These are supposedly suitable for German armour, so it'll be interesting to see how these perform. First up, this flat armour sand colour. I'm not bothering to prime anything on this kit. I find that lacquer paints generally stick to plastic pretty well without a primer, so I've gone straight in with this yellow. It's been loaded into the airbrush and I'm spraying it at around 12 to 15 psi. These outlaw paints are airbrush ready. This would be sprayed over the entire tank and then be left to dry, but the drying time is pretty low, so it was only a few minutes before I could move on to the next colour. And the next colour is going to be this dark green. So this has to be applied in a bit of a camouflage pattern. I dropped down the pressure and very carefully tried to apply it in a mottling kind of way. Whilst I probably could try and follow the painting instructions, I've decided that actually I'm just going to do my own thing and kind of invent my camouflage scheme loosely inspired by the painting instructions. With that done, this GWR maroon colour, which is a suitable red for German armour, would then be loaded into the airbrush and the process repeated. I would carefully apply this as mottling into the areas where I've left some space for it. This black colour could then be loaded into the airbrush as well, and I would apply this onto the end of the gun barrel to make it look as though it's been firing and left a bit of staining. I've been quite impressed with these outlaw paints, but it's time to move on to some smaller details. First up, this gunmetal paint is going to be used on all of the tracks. This is going to form a base colour, which I'll add elements to a bit later on. It was a little bit fiddly painting these tracks in situ, but I just took my time to get it all in the right place. There are some other elements such as the machine gun barrels and the tracks on the side of the vehicle which need to be picked out in this colour. Humbrol 32, which is a dark grey colour, would be painted onto the 3D printed jerry cans and also the tyres on the running wheels. I would do this very carefully to try and not get it in the wrong places and spoil that camouflage I've already applied. A few other bits and pieces have been picked out in relevant colours as well, such as a wood colour for the handles on the tools. And now it's on to the decals. So you do get a small sheet of decals included in this kit. These decals are printed by Cartograph and are to a lovely quality. You do get 4 different paint schemes included, well rather 4 different decal schemes as they're all very similar in painting. I selected the ones that I needed and cut them from the sheet. The decals were then soaked in some warm water to help release them from the backing paper. And if you're getting confused with your cup of tea and your brush water, perhaps a brush water mug is perfect for you. Check out my merch store and it helps support the channel. Microscale, set and sol will be my setting solutions during this build, and these would be applied onto the model to allow the decals to soften down into the surface details. Initially, microset from the blue bottle would be applied, the decals then slid into position, and then microsol from the red bottle would be brushed over the top to further enhance the effect. There aren't many decals in this kit, so this is a relatively quick part of the build. I would leave the decals to cure, and then once they were stuck in place, some of this outlaw paint gloss clear would be sprayed over the entire tank to seal everything in and help protect those decals from the next step. And the next step is to add a wash. I've got this SMS dark brown enamel wash, which I thinned down with a little bit more white spirit. I find that straight out of the pot it's a little bit too vibrant and I wanted a more muted effect. This was painted over the entire vehicle and allowed to run into all the recessed details. I want to make this a little bit more dirtier and add a bit of rust, so I've got this dirty down rust effect and it is water based so I can thin it as much as I like or reactivate it if I need to. This would be painted onto various elements including the engine exhausts, the tracks, and some other areas which I thought might need a little bit of rusting. You can thin this down with water and apply it a bit like a wash to give a kind of glaze to different parts. When that was done, I would dull down the gloss coat that was already applied by using this Humbrol number 49, which is a matte varnish. It comes in a spray can, so it's very quick to apply and should give a nice even matte finish. I want to add a little bit more dirt to this, so I've got this Ammo Damp Earth, which I loaded onto my brush and then splattered onto the lower side of the model. I've not done this before, this is a new technique to me, but I've heard this is a good way of simulating dirt and grime which has been accumulated by vehicles. I would build this up until I got to a point that I was happy with the effect. After this, some Humbrol No. 1 light grey primer colour would be loaded onto my brush and then removed. I'm going to do some dry brushing, so I want the paintbrush to feel almost dry. Dry brushing over the entire tank would help bring out any of those raised details and add a little bit more contrast. The final bit of weathering I'm going to do is to add some Green Stuff World mud texture. This texture paint would be applied to the tracks and other areas of the running gear to help give the impression that this has been running through some wet landscape. With that done, I installed the crew figure, which I've suitably painted using my normal techniques. And with some careful positioning, I'm going to call my build of the Italeri Panther complete. And that's another build under the belt. So this one is a bit of a mixed bag. So what I think I'm probably going to do is talk about the things I didn't like about this kit first, and then round off with the positive aspects. So first up, the fact of the matter is that this is dressed up as a 2024 release. It's got this beautiful artwork, it's got this tank displayed on the box with side skirts, and then you open up the box and it appears to be a pretty old tooling, which doesn't come with the bits that you need to create the version advertised on the box. Yes, a talented modeler could probably scratch build these elements, and it is nice that Italeri have told us what we need to produce, but for someone like me, who perhaps doesn't want to have to deal with that and just wanted a nice simple kit to build, to try out some new paints and things, and it turns out that actually now I've got scratch building to do. Of course, I problem solved this by doing some 3D printing, and thanks to LPJ Models for designing those side skirts, which definitely helped to solve that problem. But I think in this day and age, if you see something on the box, would it be realistic to expect that to be in the box? So that's the main issue I have with this kit. Another issue perhaps as well is the fact that the tooling is quite old, and it's not told to you on the box that this is an old rebox. So Italeri have actually added the upgraded link and length tracks to sort of improve the kit, but actually I didn't really have much success with them, and I think overall, looking at the kit, the tracks definitely let it down, because you can kind of tell that they are these like straight lengths that don't quite fit in the right places, and they look a little bit disjointed. So I wonder, actually, would a rubber band track as an extra alternative have been a good inclusion? So I'm going to give you some facts about this kit. This is a 1974 tooling, originally from Esky, which Italeri have got their hands on at some point and then re-released it in this brand new boxing that we see here. This is one of those things that's a little bit of a pet hate for me. I didn't actually do any research before I bought this kit in the shop. I saw it and I went, I've got some paints for that. It'll be a perfect test out, see how it goes. And it turns out that I've actually got this slightly old kit, well, pretty old kit, which you then have to make parts for yourself. I think manufacturers need to be a little bit more transparent. Some are, but not all, and I think in this case Italeri has dropped the ball a little bit by reboxing an old kit in a brand new box, and you think you're getting something which effectively you're not. Those are primarily the problems I have with the kit, so I would like to talk about the good things. So first up, we've got colour painting instructions. These are fantastic. I love that because it just makes things a lot less ambiguous. The level of flash was really minimal as well. The tooling is pretty nice. The details were pretty crisp, so I can't really complain. It is an old 1974 tooling, but actually the main parts of the tank went together pretty nicely, and the details are pretty decent as well. Oh, and you get a crew figure, which is absolutely fantastic as well. You get 5 decal schemes included in the kit, and the decals are printed by Cartograph. Granted, you don't get that many decals, but you get just enough. I think though, given if we try and balance those elements and we also take into effect the price of this kit, which is recommended retail price of €16, which converts to about £14 here in the UK. As you can see from the sticker on the box, I paid slightly more. It was a bricks and mortar shop and I'm quite happy to support a physical business, so I did spend a little bit more on that, but let's call it £15. I feel like I definitely was overcharged for what I got inside of the box. Perhaps if you can find this kit for around half price, or like at a maximum, I would say a tenner, then this would be better value. But for what I had inside the box, I don't feel the RRP quite justifies that. But despite the issues I had with this kit, I didn't actually hate building it. As mentioned earlier, I bought this kit primarily to try out these Outlaw paints, so thanks to Outlaw for letting me have some trial samples. And I was actually really impressed with them. I do enjoy using lacquer paints, and these ones were no exception. The paint went on nice and smooth, I didn't have to do any mixing or thinning, it just goes straight out of the bottle, and the paint was dry relatively quickly. I can't say that modelling is my best skill, but actually I'm quite happy with how the camouflage looks on this one. I found it a little bit therapeutic actually. I am quite happy with all of the weathering and little bits and pieces I've done with this kit as well. And as armour isn't necessarily my forte, I'm much stronger with aircraft, it was nice to get outside of my comfort zone and do something a little bit different. So yeah, this kit was a bit of a mixed bag. There are definitely some elements which Italeri could improve on, but despite the kit's shortcomings, I generally had quite a nice time building this kit. It wasn't the best experience in the world, but I didn't hate it. And with that, I think I'm going to end this one here. Don't forget that we have a model club, and if you'd like to join the Model Minutes Model Club and become a part of the community like these guys on screen, check out the links in the description. Massive thanks to these guys on screen who help support the creation of regular video content. There are other ways to help support the channel as well, and again, full information is below the video. The best way to support this channel for free though is by subscribing with notifications turned on so you never miss a modelling upload. Finally though, last thing to say is a massive thank you to you for watching this one, and I'll catch you on the workbench again next time.